When I lived in New York, I was a poet. I only wrote poetry, and I used to write my poems on the subway. And when I moved to LA, we're in the car so much that I started dictating in the car, and all of my line breaks like disappeared. And the writing became more conversational, and that was how So Sad Today got written. So I always wonder, would I have even started writing prose if I didn't live in Los Angeles?
Hi, welcome back. This week is part 2 of my conversation with the incredible writer, dare I say my favorite writer. I said it last week, I'll say it again, it's still true. Melissa Broder is here. She's back. This is the second half of a conversation we recorded about 2 weeks ago, and if you want to start here, you know, you absolutely can. We might reference some things from part 1, and you might want to go back and listen to that one, but as I always say, things come alive in part 2, so you know what? This might be the better half, and we cover a lot of ground, including grief and losing a parent and writing about her experience with that in the form of probably my favorite book that she's written so far, which is called Death Valley. It's a novel that came out about a year ago. And through that, we spoke about what's helpful with grieving and sitting still with ourselves, distracting ourselves and keeping busy to not feel. And you know what? Then we take a turn and we talk about our favorite grocery stores. And anyway, like I said last time, it's heavy. It's also light. She is someone who she's so funny. She's so hilarious. And it's throughout her writing, and she gives a lot of advice about writing. I asked for a lot of advice, and she gave some really great advice throughout this. She gives a journaling format that I found incredibly useful. It's called 5Gs. You'll hear about it later in this program. And then I do the Asking for a Friend segment from a previous podcast guest that you probably know and love. I really love her. So I'll let that be a surprise, and I won't linger any longer, just to tell you thank you so much for listening. Thank you for coming back. And thank you for Melissa Broder. Her writing has given me so much, and get yourself a hard copy of her books. And she has a podcast, which you'll hear, but I got a bit of an exclusive. It is coming back, and that's so exciting. If you don't know Melissa Broder because you're just dropping in right here, it's unlikely. You probably listened last week, but just in case, she's the author of several novels, including Death Valley, like I said, but also Milk Fed and The Pisces, and she wrote the essay collection, which I super love. That's called So Sad Today. She's also written some collections of poetry. She's been in the New York Times, Harper's Bazaar, Elle, Vice, New York Magazine, so many more. Okay, here is part 2 of our conversation. Yeah, I mean, I guess, okay, we're in the Death Valley era now, but the way that you wrote about grief and what you've spoken about now is anticipatory grief, and, you know, what you're talking about and experiencing now, you know, after a couple of years with that. I mean, I'll ask you it this way, like, with writing about grief, and particularly this one that you wrote about through Death Valley of losing a parent in such an unexpected way, what was helpful other than writing? What was helpful moving through that?
That's a great question. I think so. My dad was in a car accident, and he was in the ICU for 6 months before he died, which is a really long time and he actually like coded, which means he died in the ICU a couple of times and like came back, and also was like in coma states and then came out. And it was all during COVID. So I wasn't even able to go in and physically see him for the first couple of months because no one was allowed into hospitals. But then I was allowed to go see him. And, you know, I think that what really helped me though through the grieving process after was, I think, ritual. So that for me was, I hadn't been to synagogue in years, and my dad was not like a religious man at all. In fact, like he never fasted for Yom Kippur. Like he wasn't, I think I also think like he went to his parents' graves like maybe once. I don't think he ever lit a yahrzeit candle, which is the candle that you light every year on the Hebrew calendar anniversary of the person's death. And the Hebrew calendar is based on the moon rather than solar, so it changes every year, but it's the anniversary. And but for me, like saying the mourner's Kaddish, which is like the prayer recited when you lose a very close loved one, you recite it every day for, I don't think it's a full year. I think it was like, I want to say it's like 10 months. But I was so surprised to find myself like taking comfort in the mourner's Kaddish and saying it every day, or lighting the yahrzeit candle, or feeling this draw to return to synagogue. And not because like the God as presented in the Old Testament is like, I would not call that my higher power at all. But like the music, like these melodies that like remind me of my childhood and just bring me right back, and also connect me to my grandparents and like that lineage. I found that ritual. There's a wonderful book about grief and ritual and also creating one's own rituals. It's called The Wild Edge of Sorrow by Frances Weller. And I read a lot of books, or I started a lot of books about grief, and the only two that really like resonated for me were that book by Frances Weller, The Wild Edge of Sorrow, about ritual and also giving oneself enough time to grieve, and that like we can't control the process because I want to control every process. And then the other one, this is so weird, but it was the Long Island psychic Teresa Caputo's book about grief called Good Grief, and about signs. I don't know why that ended up being like a really seminal text in my grieving process. And to the extent that in Death Valley, there's a character that's sort of inspired by her. There's a psychic who is from New Jersey. I call her like the Carmela Soprano of psychics. So she's not from Long Island, but it's got that sort of East Coast accenty flavor.
Hmm. As a friend of of I mean, as we all are and will be, of I had a really close friend of mine lost her father very unexpectedly this year. And whenever, unfortunately, this is gonna people are going to keep losing their parents, all of us, I guess, and just death happens more the older you get. Is there anything that was helpful from other people, or anything that you would notice of how you can be supportive to someone going through anything challenging, I guess, but particularly that one of losing a parent in particular?
One thing I really loved was to ask, or was when people asked me to show pictures of my dad, or to tell, like, to talk about him, like what, like to talk about, to be able to like celebrate his life. Like, I think to ask somebody like, what was your father, you find out that someone, even if there's somebody that like you don't know very well, and they say that their dad, they're a relative or somebody close to them died, to ask the person's name, to ask for their name, or to ask to see a picture of them. There's like such beauty in, or like to tell them a story about the person. To me, that was like just so divine, because I think one thing that happens when someone dies is, especially if they had like like, well, I mean, it's one thing if it's in, my dad's was sort of both, because it was like there was an accident, but then it was a very protracted, it was like a long period, 6 months in the ICU. But like when the person dies, you kind of get their entire life back, because I think, and it's no longer just about like that period of their life, and like memories, like all these memories from the past come up. You sort of get to have them in the totality of like all the ages that they were, which is something I really wanted to explore with Death Valley. Yeah, you get them back in various incarnations that you knew them in. And in Death Valley, the protagonist gets her father and her husband in different incarnations that she didn't get to know them. So it's like she goes inside this magic cactus and has this sort of experience of her husband as a child, or her husband when she knew him before he was sick, or her father as a child. And it's like getting to have more time with the person and getting to know them in different ways in this in this cactus. But I do think there is a truth to that, even if we don't get to go in a magic cactus and know our parents as children, where we get to sort of we get to there when my dad died, like all these memories came flooding back, and I got to have like him in his entirety and not just him later in life. And so to ask someone to share memories is a way of keep or a picture or their name is a way of keeping the person alive, I think.
Yeah, asking them to take you into the magic cactus of the person in a way.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I mean I have to tell like I loved Death Valley so much. Like I revisiting this week I read it when you sent me the book like last summer and I hadn't read it since. I just remembered loving it, but it was about a year ago and revisiting it I really love this book so much. And yeah, in the first chapter actually I just realized I underlined something that I was like trying to or I was talking about earlier of which was probably like my nervousness of being excited to talk to you, but like over explaining things and wanting to tell the whole story. And there's this
Mm.
part, I think it's in the first chapter where you talk about, I think you say like one nice thing about a tragic situation is having an excuse to say no to everything or something like that. And you talk about, you know, how you would launch into telling the whole story and trying to convey the awfulness of something. And I just really, I mean, there's so many parts of your writing that I could call out that I relate to, but I think when I revisited this one, that one felt particularly fresh, not even in relating to it in grief, but I find myself sometimes when I'm telling a story of something, you know, you kind of have the beats, and like you said, you shorten words, and you kind of know how to tell the story. But I almost feel like I'm needing to convince someone how just how bad something is, and that never feels good, you know. So then I try to go the opposite way of just kind of giving the beats more rapidly. But just the way you wrote about even just that little part I think is so relatable to so many different situations that people go through.
Yeah, I mean, I think like when my dad was in the ICU, like there was so much up and down that like on the one hand, if someone would ask what's going on, I was like, like there was, I almost felt like I needed to include every detail. Like I was like, well, he was here yesterday and now he's in this place because there was like so much up and down. But at the same time, yes, it was if like someone asked for a blurb and because I get a lot of requests for blurbs and there's no way I'd be able to read all of the books. There's just like it wouldn't be possible as a human being to read all these books, right? And also have time for like pleasure reading. And so, you know, if I was asked for a blurb, like it was a very easy way to just, you know, if it was a book I knew that I wasn't interested in, which happens quite often, you can just, you sort of know, like you just sort of get a feel for it after years. I was just like, I'm sorry, you know, my father's in the ICU. I'm not blurbing right now. Right. And it was like so succinct
Yeah,
as
that's a
opposed to being like,
hard stop. Yeah.
right, as opposed to being like, well, I've got like six manuscripts I'm considering right now, which is always true. And, you know, so I don't have time to take on any others until I like dig out from these. And, you know, like there's a lot longer in a tooth. So it was
Yeah.
just, but there was also this thing too about like, since my father like almost died like three times in the ICU, like I was, but then like or like he was in a coma and at one point we were like he's dying and then like he came out of the coma and he was like speaking and we were like you know and joking and I mean even the day before he died like I happened to be visiting. I went to the East Coast every 2 weeks while he was in the ICU the last 3 months because I had felt like I had to make up for the time we weren't able to be there during COVID and but he would start speaking and I was like he's not gonna die like he's you know he's gonna live and I'm like am I gonna get in trouble for telling people that my father is dying and he doesn't die you know there was this sort of because there's just death is so unknown and it arrives on its own terms quite truly like even the doctors can't say.
Yeah, and that's the humor of it. Like, and you speak about that so eloquently, and that's through Death Valley as well. Of like just and it's the same thing about sex and eating and bodies and death is in a way just like it's nothing like that, but also like that, you know, of bodies are weird and bodies heal and bodies get sick and bodies die and that changes and they age and it's messy and it's wild. And I think to experience that is, that's why we're here, I guess, even though it's, it's a real mixed bag. But you talk about how finding the, or not finding the humor in that, but just like acknowledging the humor in that, of the timing and how it's unpredictable. And I think that that's alone is comforting.
Oh, I'm so glad.
I had a similar, like, I feel like broken leg is kind of like also like a similar excuse in a different way, because I guess I had a lot of time to sit around. So it wouldn't have been good if I were you for blurbs. It might have made that, saying no to that, more challenging. But it was easy to say no to the things you didn't want to do when you have something kind of big like that to say as your excuse.
Breaking your leg, actually, when my dad first went into the ICU, I had fractured my tibia.
Oh my
So my
gosh.
leg, yeah, so and there was not being able to move, like not being able to move around. It's really hard emotionally.
Yeah, yeah. And I heard you say this once too, so I feel like you'll relate, but I think I wrote this down actually. You said in that 2012 interview, I think it was, but you're like, I keep myself as busy as possible to not feel.
Yes.
And yeah, I think that was something I really had to acknowledge with this, where I was like, okay, I get it. I am grounded and I can't go back out there and do all the things I do to distract myself. It felt like elimination diets. It felt like a life elimination diet, where like all
Mm.
of my jobs, social plans, meandering a grocery store 17 times a day, walking,
Yes.
like it was all temporarily removed and then one by one, like added back in. And I have to really reckon with like, what do I want to keep? What do I have a reaction towards? And there's like a real self honesty there. But, and I think that keeping myself busy for me too, thing, and the way I relate to that is also related very much to food and eating, because I realized if I was going to turn to something to cope with my feelings, it would be to eat. And if I wanted to do my restricting well, a way to do that was to just run around and be busy all the time and not be able, it's just like, and this put a mirror up to the face of that, of like, oh, you're still doing that thing that you were doing 10 years, you're still doing, it really forced me to
Mm.
sit with some of these habits and patterns, and yeah, laugh at them even, and be frustrated, and yeah, it's all there when you have to sit still with anything.
Totally. It's so
Yeah.
true. What's your favorite grocery store in LA?
Oh my
Or
gosh.
several?
Several. I mean, I don't even, it would be really hard for me I'd have to get back to you on that. Like I need to really sit with that and do like a ranking. Cause I mean, I guess I'll say I love Gross Out. Like I call it Gross Out, grocery outlet. Are you familiar with grocery
No.
outlet? Oh my gosh. All right. Well, I got really excited because it's like a character in Miranda July's book. The unnamed, her character in that book goes to Gross Out several times. And there's one in my neighborhood. I live in Highland Park, and it's called Grocery Outlet. We call it Gross Out. And it's, like Marshalls or like TJ Maxx.
Yeah.
So like think like that, but for food, but
Whoa.
not expired food. Like I have the whole thing figured out. It's things that like will be either discontinued. Like sometimes if you see something you really love and it's there in abundance, that's not great, because it means that thing you love might be discontinued. It's temporarily great because it's like 99 cents because they're getting rid of it, but then you're never going to have it again. So that is tough. But sometimes it just means they're like repackaging it, or there was, you truly don't know why, but it's very addictive. It's very challenging for our temperament. I honestly, like, I feel like I'm giving you the needle right now, because when you go in, it's part of the fun is that you never know what you're going to get. So it's very, what is it, like when you like the slot machines or whatever that's
Yes.
called, like, it's so addictive because there's kind of an aisle on at least at mine, on the one side that's like basically like your Erewhon, your Whole Foods. So it has things that would be there for sure, are there currently for like a third of the price and not expired. Like just they're there for some reason. but you can't really go in and be like, I need hemp seeds because they
Right.
might have them in a really good deal, or they might not have them. You just don't know. But yeah, it's an incredible, and it's not. And then the rest of the store is like like your Ralph's, like your Vaughn's, but like just random. But yeah, it's a really wild place. I you gotta check it out.
I need to go to Gross Out. Okay, there's not one very close to me. However, oh no. Okay. Well, there's one near I ride horses once a week, and it looks like there's one near my riding stables in the valley. So
Okay,
that is
perfect.
exciting information.
I honestly, it's good. It's not too close to you because mine is walking distance. So
Oh my God, that's
yeah,
awesome.
it's not, but it's, it's it's an addiction and they know me there and
Wow.
I I know it's wild, but it's really fun to just like go in and be surprised and delighted about what you're going to find and not know because there's a certainty to Ralph's and there's a certainty to Gelson's and I like the unknown. I think it's interesting. What is your favorite?
God, it's like also, I mean, I love Ralph's. Ralph's because I feel like they have like everything. And I have a love affair with Ralph's. Ralph's is in my next novel. Like
Oh,
I definitely do. But I also really enjoy a Gelson's because it's like half healthy, half like, junk. Like I feel like
regular.
you can get
Yeah.
both. I don't love Whole Foods, I gotta say. Erewhon, I've just gotten like tips into. Like I for a long time I was like an anti-Erewhoner, and I'm still kind of like annoyed. Like I'm just like it doesn't have to be this expensive. Like why?
Yeah, yeah. It's
Um,
funny. It's like that is part of the fun, how
yes,
expensive
like
it is.
there's this one yogurt there that I'm obsessed with, but I'm like, it's $8 for the yogurt. So it's like special treat, right?
Yeah,
Like it's
yeah.
it's a special event. Like I'm not doing my grocery shopping at Erewhon. It's an event. And then you know what's a nice grocery store is Bristol Farms. Like I feel like Bristol Farms, it's also expensive, but it's sort of like it's not Erewhon. It's
Yeah.
not nearly. But yeah, I'd say like the bread and butter, so to speak, of my grocery shopping is Ralph's. Like my staples are Ralph's. And then like there's also this really great I'm on the west side and I go to therapy like even further west and there's this place Vicente Foods that is expensive but it's not Erewhon expensive and it's like their produce is just like I just really enjoy the way they do their produce because you can get like it's like you get like four mushrooms, right? Or like five Brussels sprouts or like it's great for like stir fry. Uh
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
think most of Eating Alone in My Car was probably taped in like, I mean, the first one, the premiere was taped in Gelson's parking lot.
Well,
So,
yeah, this is why I was just gonna say, I was like, I feel like I am in a live episode of The Shad right now, which is like the only other thing I really wanted to talk about. And I feel like it's organically we're in an episode of it a little bit. We should honestly, I should have planned that. We should have been in a car eating something, but maybe next time. Um,
yes.
but it's really special and cool that I came to your writing through this back door, not your Twitter, but from falling in love with this podcast. And like it's so funny you ask about grocery stores because I just realized like I'm from Michigan and so we don't have the same stores there and even in New York they're different. So when I lived in New York when I was listening and Ralph's I would have known what it was. I wouldn't have known Gelson's. I had no clue. Like I'd been here one time, like before I moved here accidentally. So it's so funny that when I just realized when I moved here and I knew about these grocery stores, it was from your podcast.
I love that. That's wonderful. If I can do one thing, it's be an emissary from the grocery stores of Los Angeles to the world.
Yeah, oh my gosh, truly. Well, okay, one thing about your work, including the shad, is place feels very important to you. And I know you've spoken about it before in terms of the desert and Death Valley or Venice with the Pisces and your car with the podcast. But can you talk about like how you as a person interact with places and how they affect you and how that subsequently goes into your work?
It's actually funny that place features so prominently in my work because like as a human, I sort of um my husband's always like, he is like you don't live on the planet. Like you live somewhere else. And teachers in school were always like Earth to Melissa. Like I've never lived. I think it's like that desire to escape my body and being a person who's very much caught in my head, like I've always sort of lived half on the planet and half in outer space. Like I was joking with someone that if I ran for president, it would be like independent outer space. That would be sort of, or like if I was a senator, right? It would be like I like independent outer space. And um the space party, even though I have no desire to go to space, but like maybe it's inner space actually. So, but place, it really started featuring prominently because when I lived in New York, I was a poet. I only wrote poetry and I used to write my poems on the subway. And when I moved to LA, we're in the car so much that I started dictating in the car and all of my line breaks like disappeared. And the writing became more conversational. And that was how So Sad Today got written. So I always wonder, would I have even started writing prose if I hadn't lived in Los Angeles, if I didn't live in Los Angeles?
It's wild.
Mm.
It's so interesting that you write that way because I guess I just want to tell you this, but I'm a very auditory, like listening to things is much more natural to reading for me, or much quicker. And I like reading your books, actually, like holding them, although sometimes I love that you read your audiobooks, but something that I was thinking about when I heard about your process is the way that I write is I write like on not dictating regular, I guess, on the computer, but I always edit. I'm like the opposite of you. I edit while walking. So I have a thing where it's called Speechify that I put the text into. And then I started because it's really easy to catch typos when you hear something. But now, even when it's clean, I know for typos or someone else has copy edited something, I'll still walk and listen to it because it's much easier for me to cut it that like, it's my version, I guess, of what you say about like the capital letters or like sending yourself the ebook from someone else. It like helps me hear it fresh. So yeah, I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah, editing in motion is very cool.
Yeah, and then I like kind of write down a list and then go back to it. Because how I edit the podcast, like when I listen, I write down timestamps, and because I'm doing it like where other people listen, I guess. But yeah, it's so cool to hear about a process that has different elements in different locations and is more mobile. And yeah, I really love hearing about that. There's like a billion more things that I want to ask you. Can I do a couple quick fire questions so I don't keep
Ye
you all day?
Totally.
Okay, here's a few rapid fire. I guess just briefly with the shod, like what was that experience like for you? Like, do you think you'd ever do a podcast again, or do you think you'd ever bring that back?
Yeah, when I was just on tour for Death Valley, I promised people that I was going to bring it back, and then I haven't brought it back. But I think it is my intention to bring it back at some juncture.
Oh, good. Exclusive. Great. Or not exclusive. You told
Yes.
other people that, but I'm stoked. I'm just so happy to hear
Breaking.
that. Yeah,
Breaking.
breaking.
Yes.
I'm so happy. Okay. On the topic of bodies, like back in the milk fed era, we'll call it, being a body is hard. And a couple of things I guess I would love for you to riff on related to that. I'd love to just hear you talk about vanity and aging and bodies, and even like one thing I heard you say recently that I also related to is just you were sleeping in later than you wanted to, and how you sort of reframed that in your mind. So just the physicality of living and like, pushing yourself in different ways. So where are you with that now? And like, has there been anything that's helped you?
So basically, like the words that I like always like repulsed me were like self-love, self-compassion. And of course, like with what we hate, we end up becoming. So like I actually found myself like I'm doing a self-compassion workbook there. I had read this study by this UK psychologist. I found it by Googling like recovering from nervous breakdown because I feel like I definitely had some sort of breakdown like last fall prior, which is what I was like in this sort of, I think the compulsion to sort of try to fix my depression led me into like such an anxious state that it was like, it was breakdown-ish. It was breakdown. It was, like it was hard for me to function. And so in Googling that, I found this with the work of Paul Gilbert, who's a UK psychologist, and he did this study about people who have trouble. There were a couple of elements of self-compassion. There were a couple of like quotes that really resonated for me. Like one was that people who are high self-critics can like understand the logic of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is the form of therapy I do. And we can even generate alternative thoughts to self-criticism, but we rarely feel reassured by such efforts. Like, and the same can be true of mindfulness. Like without the container of self-compassion, mindfulness can bring up like very scary feelings that we just don't have the soothing system to handle. Also, that people who are high self-critics can perceive like feelings of warmth or reassurance as actually like that we give ourselves as like scary, like that it can because we can feel like afraid to sort of be kind to ourselves. And then the other piece from that study that I thought was really interesting is that self-criticism, while it's an internal stimuli, the brain and body and fight or flight system, which by the way, like self-criticism is linked to the fight or flight in that it's the mind uses it as a coping mechanism when we're in fight or flight. It's obviously not a great coping mechanism. And what's bad about it is that what we perceive, the body and brain perceive internal self-criticism as an external threat. So it's like we're sort of trying to soothe our activated threat system with something that we're then perceiving as an external threat. So it's like this cycle. All that being said, that got me really, I was like, oh shit, now I have to consider self-compassion. So I got this self-compassion, the mindful self-compassion workbook from Kristen Neff, who's like audiobooks I had tried to listen to before. And I was like, I hate this so much. Like, this is awful. And the workbook has been incredible. That's been really, really helpful. So it's like, what we hate, we will eventually come to embrace sometimes.
That no, that's helpful. I want to check it out. With writing, do you have any advice for someone who, maybe relates to a method that, like how you said, you maybe wouldn't have started to write in the way that you do if you hadn't moved here? Obviously, that's so individual, the method of writing for everyone. But what would you suggest to someone who wants to write more, wants to write novels or essays? Where would you, other than reading, which I know you're an avid reader and I want to talk about too, but what are your other pieces of advice for even like capturing ideas?
I think just like keep a notebook, very simple. That's very simple. Also, like don't be afraid to write like a little bit. So like sometimes I'll only work on my novel for like 15 minutes in a day, but I have to open the document.
Mm, yeah, that's helpful. One day at a time.
Yes, and little bits. You'd be surprised what you can get done in little chunks. A lot of days I'll only work for like an hour, but it's like I get a lot done.
Yeah, I love that. You mentioned somewhere else, that you started a journal project, and I'm really curious about and it might end up in a novel elsewhere, but I'm curious about your relationship to journaling and what is your relationship to writing that you don't share?
Yes, I do have a journal. For many years, I like wasn't journaling, but I have a kind of bullet journal and like a little format that I use. So at the end of the day, I do what I call the 5 Gs. So I write down like what was good, what was God, which for me, like, I don't know, the term God, I tend to like more refer to it as like a higher power or like wise mind or inner wisdom. But so it's like good, what was God, what I'm grateful for, glitches, and like goals for the next day. That's sort of how I do my journaling.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, I love
Um,
it. The 5 Gs.
Oh, I love that. Okay. The last thing I want to ask you, so I do this segment asking for a friend, and if we have mutual friends, I have them submit a question. I just realized I should have texted Nada, but I did text one person. So I sublet from Leah Clancy, who I know you know a little bit, and
Oh
I
yeah.
read her copy of So Sad today, and so it was like a real bonding thing for us to like see what she had underlined, and it was really like special for our friendship. And so she texted me two questions for you. So one is, I would love to know how her dog Pickle is doing.
Pickle is great. He recently had an anal abscess and he got put in the cone because he had to have like a minor, very minor surgery on his anal glands. But other than the anal gland fracas and being in the cone, he's out of the cone and he's doing great. He is turning 11 in November.
Aw, happy early birthday, Pickle.
Thank
Another.
you. Well, we estimate that. Basically, we I started fostering him 10 years ago and they said he was 1 and it was in November, so I always say his birthday's in November. I call him Mr.
Mm.
November.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I mean, dare I say co-host of the shot or definitely a character.
Yes. Rides with
Um,
me.
okay, and she has one more question, which is great because it encompasses my last question. So she says, maybe ask her how her earlier focus on poetry has informed her current writing practice and what she's working on at the moment.
Sure. So I think that being a poet, you work in such like on such a small canvas that you want every line to be every word to be chosen correctly and every line to be a diamond. And I think that really informs the way I tend to edit my novels the way I would poetry. What I'm working on right now is oh, and also I think like the music and rhythm of poetry like can inform how I end a chapter, or like I'll use rhythm and syllabics even to end a chapter. And then in terms of what I'm working on right now, I'm writing a novel. I'm about 30,000 words in, so roughly like a third to halfway done. I'd say I'm like two-fifths of the way done.
Oh, exciting. Did some of that
Mhm.
journal project make it in?
It did indeed.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm stoked. I'm stoked for everything you write. And thank you so much for taking all the time. And I know it's like we've spent hours together at this point, but your work is so meaningful to me, and I'm so glad that we got to talk. And so this show is called Let It Out. Is there anything that you wish that I would have asked that you never get to talk about, or anything else that you want to share?
No, but I love the name of the show.
Okay, so we end by letting out a deep breath together. You ready?
Ready.
Okay, inhale, let it out. Ah, that always feels a little better.
I love it.
Thank you so much, Melissa. This was really, really great, and I'm so grateful. And like I said, I'm so sorry that it took so long.
No, this was really fun. I
Oh,
really appreciate it. I had a ball.
oh, thank you so much. And yeah, maybe we can go to Gross Out sometime and record an episode in the parking lot.
Oh my God, I'm going to gross out.
I'm stoked. You got it. Yeah, you got to give me a full report. I hope it's good for you that day because it can really depend on the day. So I hope it really shows up for you.
No, I think there's one right near the stable where I ride, so I'll be going multiple times.
Okay, great, good. Because then you can really see the what I mean by the difference. Part of the fun.
I'm very excited for gross out.
That's what I have to offer is Gross Out. So
I cannot wait.
thank you so much. This episode is sponsored by Grocery Outlet. Just feel free to check out your local store.
Amazing.
Have a good rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. Like I said, get yourself a hard copy of her books or get them at the library. Follow her. I am just so grateful. Like I said, okay, listen, let me this is what I need to say. I was such a fangirl in this episode that it was a bit painful for me to listen to. I edited out the worst of it, but she really deserves a medal and an honor and a privilege for putting up with me being so stoked and having so many questions and just coming in hot. So, and then you now had to put up with that as well. But you know what? The coolest thing in my life is this podcast. Is that sad that that's true? It might be true. It's definitely the longest term relationship I've ever had as a grown-up, and the reason I love it so much is it's allowed me to meet so many incredible people from all over the world who listen to it. And I also have this wild thing where I get to, just because I'm recording it, I get to talk to occasionally people who I genuinely love their work, and then I get to spend, in this case, 2 hours with them, and that wouldn't be possible without you listening. So thank you so much. Thank you to Melissa. And I just, I think that's par for the course sometimes, to just get overly excited about something. And have a lot that you want to say and ask. And I could have spoken to her more about 100 million different topics, but I'm so grateful for all the time that she took to hang out with me that day and that you took to hang out with us this day that you're listening. Okay, a lot of good episodes are coming out. Somebody else that I have been really excited to talk to for years happened, and that one will be out soon. I'm going to be doing another live episode in LA soon. More to come. We mentioned the zine in the last one, so if you are wanting one, the way to do it is to go to my Substack and become a paid subscriber, and I'll send you one. And if you really want one and that's not in the cards for you, I'm trying to figure out a way that I can sell them outside of that. But if you like my Substack and you were thinking about that anyway, maybe that can push you over the edge for that. But if not, no worries. We'll get one to you. If you're in Los Angeles and you're on the east side, or if you want to take a trip to the east side, they're available at Noto and at Skylight and at the Pop Shop for now, maybe more places. It's called Pivot, and I will be writing more zines probably. I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna go, but thank you so much for listening and being here. I'm so grateful. I'm really happy to be here too. This podcast is edited by Jeremiah. Thank you so much. Talk to you very soon. Bye-bye.